So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the palettes um, that we use as we go through here. We'll do some of these, or we'll have done some of these in class, um, but I figured I'd get a little more in depth on some of these videos here. And we're going to talk about the snapping palette. And if it's not open on your screen, window, palettes, and then snapping. So everything is in here. Snapping is one that I utilize, but I rarely have it open. I usually kind of set it and then walk away from it because I'm not really changing it that often. So the first one is snap to grid, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to line things up to the grid, and we'll talk here in a little bit about how you can change the grid and adjust the grid. I tend to not use it, really just personal preference. I don't know why I don't use it, it's just personal preference. Snap to object, I will usually leave on. And so that is, if I have my cursor here, I can select, and now I'm snapping to the object, right? You can get top right, center, top left. And so now if I draw a line starting from there, I know that that's connected. I can zoom in and go, okay, most definitely those lines are connected. Snap to angle, and I noticed when I did a test run of this that you can't really see it. For some reason, it doesn't record what I'm doing here. But anyway, if you start to draw a line, it will stop and pause at 45 degree, 30, horizontal, 90. It will stop and pause at those. You can also do that with just holding down the shift after you start your line. I usually leave it on. It works for me. It's okay. Snap to intersection. Let's say object. It'll say endpoint where that line is. Let's draw another line here. And now if I go, it'll say object. So it's going to snap to that intersection. And so I know that that's where those lines meet if I need to add something else there. Smart points, I really like. If you hover over, you see that it'll turn red there. And then it extends out a line. So if I was going to draw another rectangle and I wanted the top to line up, I get my smart point, and now I know that top lines up. Or I could go over to the bottom, get that smart point, maybe, stay with me. There it is. And now make those line up. Really handy. I utilize that quite a bit. Snap to distance, we'll talk. Didn't turn it on. We'll talk a little bit, but you can see these these arrows show up on our line when I hover on it. And so that's splitting it in quarters, and that's how it's set. That's the default setting, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means here in a moment. And then Smart Edge, if I hover here, I get that line that goes all the way through the rectangle, and then I can get another line. So it'll hold those lines there in both horizontal and vertical. And good, this worked for me. I have selected in there, I think it's default, you can snap to bisector as well. So now it's going to tell me where those lines bisect. Snap to tangent, I really just have not come up with a circumstance where I needed it. But if I start a line here, right, it's always going to run tangent to the circle. If I start to draw it connected to the circle, it's just always going to run tangent. Typically, I turn that off. Like I said, I don't use the grid. You will not hurt my feelings if you use the grid. And for the most part, the rest of these stay on, and then I close that out. But before I do that, I'm going to go to under Tools, Smart Cursor Settings. And here's where you can kind of change a few things and how you want it to function. Here's where you can change your grid, where on the object you want it to snap to. You can adjust if you know that you are using a 22.5-degree angle a lot on a project. You can set that as one of the angles that that it will stop at, right? Smart point, again, there are things, it's how long you want to hover over a smart point before it actually, your mouse over the smart point before it actually acquires it. Smart edge, and this is kind of neat, and I don't know when I might use this, but it's not come up. So if you wanted something, if you wanted to line things up like a foot apart, right? So snap to offset, you can select that, and now I can go here. It's not going to do it on there. It's not going to cooperate for me. I swear I did a trial run. Let's go back. Snap to offset, 1 foot. There it is. So now if I draw that line, that's going to be 1 foot away. Right? You just have to kind of hover, get that, and then. So kind of an interesting option that you can use. I'm going to turn it off. We talked about the snap to distance a little bit. The default here is to set it up in quarters. So if I zoom in on this line, you can see those arrows. That's at 25%. That splits that line into quarters. I can go back in here, and if there's a reason why I want this to be at 12 inches in that line, now that point, those arrows are 12 inches in. Could be useful. I have not used it. There's the snapping palette. Like I said, I usually keep this closed, but if you do need it back, again, window, palettes, snapping.